Hey, folks, in this episode of the podcast, I'm sitting down with artist Laurel Richardson. She's based in Brooklyn, New York. We're going to dive into her past, her present, and the future of her art. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today on the show, a little something different. We like to talk to artists of all genres on the podcast, and this one's no different. It's not all photography. Some artists do things outside of photography and incorporate photography into their work. Laurel Richardson is one such person like that. She is an artist that I've known for a little bit, and she's, like I said at the intro there, she's based in Brooklyn, or I'm sorry, not Brooklyn, Harlem, New York. And we're going to be talking about her work. We're going to dive in a little deep and see what makes Laurel Richardson tick. Laurel, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for agreeing to do this. You and I, we've known each other for a while and recently reconnected online, and I got a chance to look at your work. I was blown away, so congratulations on everything you're doing, and congratulations on your gallery show. So let's talk about that a little bit before we dive into the work itself, kind of, foreshadowing the end with the beginning. The gallery show, what's that all about, and how did that come about?
So it's titled This Is Not Enough. The curator is Sophie Olympia Reese, and she gathered a group of women painters who are focused on sort of reaching for power and strength within their work, and looking inwards and doing work that's somewhat a bit of a self-portrait, but also looking towards the future. And so that's in Chelsea right now, and it's something I'm really happy to be a part of.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And how's it going? Because we're in the middle, as we record this, we're, moving towards mid-December 2020,
right?
COVID era, right? So has that affected the traffic and otherwise the
Definitely.
Yeah.
So galleries would normally be open and you would see people coming out, but it's not as busy as it usually is, but there are people that are still going, and we have a virtual presence as well. So you can go to Slag Gallery and see the show virtually. So it's different, but we're still getting, as many people as possible.
It's good. It's good. And is this your first show? Your first gallery show?
No, it's not. But in Chelsea, it is. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. So congratulations on all that. But let's rewind. Let's rewind back, towards the beginning. When I believe when you and I met, you were into ballet and dancing. So you've always been in the arts in some way, I think, right? So tell us about that transition from dance, which is physical, into more of the, let me put my stuff on paper or, some other medium.
Right. So I've always been a dancer. I've always been a visual artist as well. But sometimes, I did dance professionally first, and everything from contemporary ballet to modern dance. I was with Cleo Parker Robinson Dance Ensemble, which is a modern dance company in Denver, Colorado, and a few companies in Chicago, and a little bit of regional Broadway theater in New York. And I've always loved to move, and definitely now that I'm doing more painting and installation, I always incorporate movement. So a lot of the work that you see that I will have sort of the feeling of a body within the work, and I think about space and movement and how my body can be placed into the space. It's sort of just a transfer of the way that I'm creating, but I see them as both part of my way of working still.
I like that. I like that. Always in the arts, always about the arts. It's in your DNA. Tell me about this phase, right? This phase of your sort of artistic journey, where we are now. Tell me about what's the driving force, and where are we going with it?
So I'm really inspired by connections with other people, especially family members and community members and neighbors, and thinking about how we connect with one another, how we transfer acts of care, um, thinking about belonging. And I look a lot into my own family history, into my ancestry, and I'm interested in the stories that my grandmother have told me, my aunts have told me. Um, and really, this recent body of work started when I cleaned out my grandmother's sewing room after being in her home for 50 years, and she's 93 years old now, and so she had to leave her home after a fall. And I went to her sewing room and I collected all of these scraps of fabric that she had used throughout the years to make me clothing, herself clothing. And I just would put those scraps of fabric together, sort of in the sense of like African American quilt making. And
Hmm.
it became sort of like what remains. And that really took me on a journey of tracing my own migration. So, looking at stories beginning in Chicago, but also thinking about the stories of my family throughout the Great Migration, and looking at my family tree, um, took me to Harlem, and then to recently to Ghana, where I was there for the transatlantic slave trade, a 400-year anniversary. And so going back and just looking at history is really, really something that drives me.
That's really, really interesting. I had no idea you went to Ghana, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been sort of researching that movement. Lots of people are moving to Ghana, part of the diaspora, and all that. Are you considering
I
a
would
relocation?
love, I would love to live there.
Why aren't you
Definitely in
living
my
there
mind.
then? Why not?
Well, I mean, 2020, it's really interesting. So I came back from Ghana in January, and then all this, that the COVID happened. And
Yeah.
uh, anyway, so we'll see what happens in the
Wow.
future.
Wow. Yeah, obviously I haven't been there, but from what I've seen online on YouTube, etc., it looks like an amazing place. It's full of opportunity, in terms of there's a lot of stuff to be done, right? It's almost like
Right.
a blank canvas in some ways, but steeped in history and tradition in other ways. So, yeah, yeah. That's cool. So let's talk about the work a little bit and just sort of dive into that. When you said a lot of the work that you do, at least this current phase, is driven just sort of by documenting and remembering and
Right.
just sort of moving down that road. What is that? What does inspiration look like? So if you are going to add another piece to the collection, how does that
Mhm.
come about? Is it more organic? Do you have a list of things that you feel like you want to execute on before you call it done? How does that work for you?
It's definitely more organic, and sometimes I cycle back to work that I've been working on. I listen to tapes, I listen to recordings of interviews that I have done. I am working on a recording that I did with the Queen Mother in this village of Basiasi. I call her
Hmm.
Nana, and I had the most amazing conversation with her. Sort of the conversation that I would have with my grandmother, and sort of piecing those bits of information, parts of the story, and all of these elements, bringing them together. So all of these um, sort of the note taking and the gathering of documents and the gathering of research and speaking to people gathered with fabric and a painting that I started over here and drawings, and sort of all sort of come together, and it happens organically. Recently, with like the summer, with all of the social unrest, I was thinking about acts of resistance, being in a space of instability, and how excuse me, and how I would push forward beyond that point, and where I would feel, how I feel at this moment, being isolated. Um, how can I work with what I have? What makes me comfortable? What can I put forward? Um, I'm very much in process. I'm always recycling and going back to work I've already started.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. It was on my list. Just sort of how does we talked about family and sort of documenting that side of things. I'm curious, when you look at the social change and the everything that's happening in the world right now, both on police brutality and just systemic racism, all that stuff, and the demonstrations that I'm sure were happening around you in Harlem. I'm curious how that affects the artist in you. I know from a photography standpoint, photographers, depending on the photographer, they'll feel compelled to go out there and document or create work that tells how they're feeling. You're a more tactile artist. How does it affect you, and how does it come out in your artwork?
I think a lot of times I go into myself. I journal a lot. I will take notes as well as document, but I think I sort of think of my body as an archive as well at times,
Mm-hmm.
and embodying the just the space and the environment around me. So that will sort of come out in notes. I might just do a sketch. A lot of times I begin by dyeing my fabric. I use
Mm-hmm.
pins a lot. Pins were on the floor of my grandmother's sewing room, so I use pins as a way of charting, also mapping, and as memory. Um, so it all affects me daily. It comes out of my journal.
Yeah, it's the
Many
true
different ways.
artist. One of the things I'm curious about is it's so fascinating talking to you, because it's a different take on art than the traditional kind of road that I'm on, which is photography and computers and pixels and megapixels and all, lenses and all this stuff, all the technical stuff. And it's refreshing to talk to you because it sounds much more soul driven and tactile and real, and it's coming from you versus somewhere else. And that somewhere else is what I want to talk about next. That's just sort of the motivations for work, contrasting what you do and what I'm learning about how you approach your work to some photographers and artists in general, that their motivation is mainly for, I don't want to say adoration, but it's more for, they're creating work for others. Like on Instagram, they're creating work, and the measure of their success is how many likes they get on that. If it doesn't get enough likes, then the piece is a failure. If it gets thousands and thousands, or in some cases millions of likes, then clearly it's a success because the crowd likes it. Like a Laurel Richardson that approaches things differently. You've been performing in front of those audiences, right? And like, if they clap, that's good. If they don't clap, it's bad. How does that translate to this world, to the tactile world? Are you creating stuff, or, maybe it's not a binary choice, but is some of you creating the body of work and validated by social acceptance, or do you just not care? If there was nobody looking at it, you'd still create the work. How do you approach it?
If there's nobody there, I would still need to create the work.
Okay.
But I definitely, it's representation is very important to me as well, in terms of the way that we view Black bodies. So I keep that in mind as well, whether I'm doing figuration or something that's more abstract. I want the viewer to somehow be able to access the work or be implicated by the work, feel something, whether or not it makes them think different way, or whether I'm posing questions or critiquing something. I'm usually making a critique about something, or making propositions. So in that sense, I do want to engage the viewer, but my work is very personal. So I would be creating it whether or not there was an audience or not. But of course, you need an audience.
Yeah, of course. If a tree falls in the forest, right? Yeah, have you created any pieces that are so personal that you're not going to share publicly? Because I know
for sure.
there's a ton of photos that I have that no one will ever see, right? They're for me. Yeah, you have that as well?
Mm-hmm. I do.
That's awesome. That's good. See, that's the artist. That's the artist in you.
Yeah.
So, Laurel, I'm curious about what's next. Like, where are we going with this? Like, this body of work in the gallery show, obviously, you're looks like you're at the beginning of your career in a lot of ways. You got a lot of, yeah. So what's next?
So I'm in process. I'm definitely in process, and I'm looking back through all of the interviews that I've done, and recordings and conversations that I've had with people over the years. It's all in my computer, and I'm actually writing a story about sort of this character that it's loosely based on the work of myself tracing my own migration, and it becomes sort of like a fairy tale, and she has a magic skirt, and she's going through these different places and charting histories and charting and claiming space, and imagining new realities and discovering old realities that are very present within her world. And I'm excited about telling this story, and whether it's going to be in the form of it's in written form right now, but it's also sound, and there will also be painting as well. So I'm very much in process, and looking forward to having more shows and showing my work as when I can.
I love it. I love it. In constant state of evolution and pressing forward. As we end this, Laurel, I want to ask you kind of a weird question. If you kind of mentioned that as we were talking, you were laying out this visual kind of path that you're on, and me kind of splicing in the Laurel that I know, kind of where you're going. I can see a trajectory of kind of where you're going. If you take that trajectory and make it a script, who would play Laurel Richardson? Like, who would be the celebrity that you would see on the big screen playing your life story? Who is it? You're on the spot.
Pippi Longstocking.
I did not expect Pippi Longstocking out of you. I don't see the red pigtail.
That's very me. That's me. When no one's looking.
Do you have super strength and all that stuff too?
Yeah.
That's awesome. You know what? If I turn that question on me, who would play me? I think the inside me that I perceive me as, Idris Elba would play me.
Oh, okay.
But the way the world perceives me would probably be like Will Smith or somebody.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, so it depends if it's an action adventure or a comedy. So one of those. So, well, cool. So if people want to connect with you, they want to see the work, obviously we'll have some images from the gallery in the blog post for this episode. But if they want to see the work or connect with you, or, otherwise be in touch, what's the best way to do that?
Well, my Instagram, is at Laurel A. Richardson on my website as well, laurelrichardson.com, and shoot me an email and I will pass along my number and we can, we can chat.
Very good. Excellent. Well, Laurel, thank you again for coming on. It's a pleasure chatting with you, and great catching up, and keep on keeping on, man. You are, it's refreshing. Like I said towards the beginning of this, it's refreshing to talk to someone who is a true artist. And very, very seldom do I get a chance to talk to true artists, people that would, like we said, be doing the work, whether or not there are eyeballs or likes or plus ones or whatever, or hearts, whatever associated with it. You have that burning fire to do it regardless. It just has to come out. And that's that, an aspect of the true artist. So congratulations on that. Not everybody has that. So yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Laurel. Well, thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon, I hope.